A modern day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Layer Kick. A Coen brothers end up with Timothy Chalamet.
A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel. Alvin and the Chipmunks deserve another squeakquel.
There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update.
But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
During this season of Ruined Childhoods, we're selecting movie titles in alphabetical order, going from A to Z, then Z back down to A. On our last Y episode, we celebrated Barbra Streisand's 1983 sensation, Yentl, the story of an early 20th century Jewish woman living in a Polish shtetl, but her controversial aspirations to study the Talmud left her with no other option but to pose as a man in order to do so. Though this particular story had never been shown on screen, the theme of resisting gender norms was quite common on the silver screen. In 1933, Greta Garbo portrayed the titular role of Queen Christina, who posed as a man in order to escape her life as a royal and follow her passions. In 1954, Joan Crawford stars in Johnny Guitar, the tale of a woman who lives life on her own terms and bucks gender norms by wearing pants, donning a six-shooter, and standing up to an unruly mob. In the 1957 film Desk Set, Katharine Hepburn plays a librarian who refuses to sacrifice her intellectual upper hand and succumb to the emotional tethers of Richard, played by Spencer Tracy. But some films at the time attempted to instill feminist values, but majorly missed the mark. The 2000 McG film Charlie's Angels positions itself to be female-forward, but the over-sexualization of its leads took precedent over any message of empowerment. The 1961 film Breakfast at Tiffany's seems to intend to position Audrey Hepburn's Holly Golightly as an unapologetic free spirit, but the film instead rebels against its source material and instead portrays her as broken and in need of saving. And in the 1958 film Gigi, our protagonist rebels against the path of a courtesan in order to live life on her own terms, but she still bends to the institution of marriage and desire for traditional beauty standards. Gigi was directed by Vincent Minnelli, and despite its criticisms, swept the Academy Awards in all 9 categories for which it was nominated, including Best Score, Song, Editing, Color Cinematography, Art Direction, Adapted Screenplay, Director, Motion Picture, and finally, Cecil Beaton for Best Costume Design. The honor of Best Costume Design began in 1949, celebrating 1948's on-screen costuming. At the time, the award was given both to color films and then also black and white films. For the first several years, wardrobe legend Edith Head won back-to-back-to-back-to-back Oscars for her work on Joan of Arc, The Heiress, All About Eve, Samson and Delilah, and A Place in the Sun. And then after no wins in 1952, Edith Head began winning again for Roman Holiday and Sabrina. But in subsequent years, Head would regularly be nominated for the award, but ultimately lose. From 1955 to 1958, Head would be nominated in both color and black and white categories. It wouldn't be until the 1967 Oscars that Head would not be nominated at all. But for many, it's simply an honor to even be nominated. Just ask costumer Sandy Powell, nominated 15 times with a total of 3 wins. Colleen Atwood was nominated 12 times with 4 wins, and Patricia Norris was nominated 6 times, but has no wins. But some costume designers were only nominated once and with 0 wins, such as Yoshiro Muraki, who designed the costumes for this episode's film. Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods. I'm John, that's my brother Dan, and on this episode we celebrate the 1961 Akira Kurosawa classic Yojimbo, the story of a Ronin and bodyguard for hire who instead decides to subvert societal norms to achieve his goal to tear the entire system apart. Dan, have you ever been a sword guy?
I had a few years. In the early aughts, I was a sword. I don't know. What does that mean by were you ever a sword?
Oh,
do I like playing with swords, or have I collected swords?
There are people who are like sword people. They have an interest in swords.
Do I pretend to be a sword?
No, come on. There are people who are like sword enthusiasts and get replica swords of, famous swords and things like that.
Oh, I know. You forget I teach in a high school.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I've heard, there's always one kid who we have to tell, don't bring it to school.
Right.
So, I feel like I was more of a lightsaber guy.
Okay, so you understand what a sword person is like,
Yes.
but it's just never been something that's interested you at all?
No. I've had the opportunity in my time, in my acting days,
Mm-hmm.
have had the opportunity to do some work with swords.
Okay.
And I thought it was like a lot of fun. I always enjoyed doing stage combat.
Oh, okay.
And I was in a production of Robin Hood and played the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Mm.
And we actually had a really like fun duel. I want to say it was even choreographed by like a well-known fight choreographer, because like a lot of like this was a Northeast New Jersey theater company. And like, oh God, was it like Rick Sordelay? I think might have been.
It's got the word sword in his name.
I'm trying. I know, right? I mean, he sounds like he should be a fight choreographer, but I'm trying to remember if it was Rick Sordelay or if another fight choreographer who like also did stuff for Broadway, but like had done New Jersey like regional and community theater and like still came back. And I feel like there was another guy who did the same thing, but I swear I'm fairly positive it was Rick Sordelay who choreographed this lovely duel that I got to have with Robin Hood.
Okay.
And, in a little, not theater and around, it was a thrust stage. So audience on 3 sides and
Cool.
Just getting, practicing with the swords. It's just like when you're a little kid who grows up enjoy pretending with swords, whether it's lightsabers or what have you.
Yeah.
It's like it's this kind of like wish fulfillment, and it was a lot of fun. So
Okay.
what about you? How do you what's your history with swords?
It's never interested me. I feel like I'm pretty weapon averse to begin with. I don't know. The idea of it never really occurred to me. Watching Yojimbo, I was definitely like, oh damn. And then watching a few of its like remakes, which we'll talk about later,
Right.
where swords aren't involved, it's like, man, you really lose a lot by not having a sword.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sword, so much style, so much flair, the excitement, the just kind of like the classiness of fighting with swords and the art of it.
I actually I want to go back a little bit. So here's a little this isn't a story, but just sword information about how some sort of sword thing was part of my life for a moment. But I was working for a cultural institution and I was managing their YouTube channel, and there was one video that was on their channel that got like thousands of views a day, and it was a silent video that was all about making katanas or katana. I don't know if the plural of katana is katanas. And
Katanim?
Sure. And if you're Yentl, perhaps.
I was going to say, like, that sounds very Hebrew.
Yentl was a New York Times crossword puzzle answer recently.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, there's our girl. So this video got so many plays that it was like, hey, we could monetize this YouTube channel if we wanted to and bring in a few extra bucks or whatever and not have to do anything, because it's like this one video is just like cranking out views and people commented on it all the time. People who are really into swords who are just like, that's not the way that a blah, blah, blah would do a blah, blah, blah about swords. And it was really fun to kind of watch that. And, I had to monitor the comments just to make sure that nobody was saying anything inflammatory, which did happen.
Of course.
And, I think that with any subject where people are passionate about something, it's going across the line at some point. And so you had to kind of be on that. But it was interesting to get a glimpse into that world of what a sword person is all about.
How they operate.
Anyway, that's kind of where it begins and ends with me and the mighty blade.
Yeah. I enjoy some good sword play on screen. Of course, The Princess Bride.
We talked at length about the Princess Bride on the Yentl episode, our last Y episode. So,
But
we can
just
give that a
like
break.
so, like I'm quickly trying to go to like one of my favorite like sword duels. I have to go with Luke versus Vader in Empire Strikes Back
Mm-hmm.
as being just one of the most exquisitely shot as well
Mm-hmm.
in that. And yeah, you really don't get that much like sword play in Yojimbo. per
There's
se.
not sword play because swords in Japanese culture, it's less swashbuckly.
Right.
It's not. There's not a lot of ching 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 ching. It's a very fast movements and I don't know. I feel like it's kind of it's a solo craft rather than like fencing.
It's much more, well, it's akin to the, assassin's
Right.
gun, where they're not like, it's not for sport.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that's something that I really enjoyed about Yojimbo is that, and I enjoy a little bit of the, the back and forth sword play if it makes sense, but like,
It didn't make sense in Yojimbo.
no, not at all.
No.
And, to see the way that our protagonist Sanjuro went about, when he would use the blade versus when he would kind of take a step back was also like something that was really cool about it, where it's like, look, he's not just showboating all the time just for the sake of like showing off, like, look how great I am with this blade. It was its own kind of like, I use it when it makes sense for me to use it.
Right. Yeah. And even when he's not using it necessarily in the like heat of the moment combat,
Mhm.
it's being used for a purpose. Even when it seems like he's showing off, he's doing something to make a point. And
Yeah.
so anyway, shall I go into a synopsis?
Give us a synopsis,
Yeah.
Dan.
Okay. A wandering Ronin arrives in a lawless village torn between two rival gambling gangs. Hired by both sides, he cleverly manipulates them into destroying each other, using their greed and violence against them. In the chaos, the samurai uses his wiles to restore peace to the town without ever declaring a side.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I don't want to disrespect the actors by not pronouncing names properly.
Right.
I will say that, I mean, Akira Kurosawa is the star of this film, really.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like it's
Without even being in front of the camera.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, Kurosawa, especially for me as a contemporary viewer who like didn't grow up on his movies and is kind of in the process of discovering them,
Mhm.
it's like that. I want to watch a Kurosawa film. I want
Yeah.
to see
Yeah,
what
yeah.
Kurosawa and like, yes, and in Japan, I'm sure there's much more to market, or at least there was when this movie came out. But yeah, so
Well, Toshiro Mifune Toshiro had an incredible body of work
big
before
star.
Yojimbo, and Yojimbo, even, I mean, I think from the 40s was working. I just pulled up his filmography right now. And so then after Yojimbo, you immediately have Sanjuro, the
Yeah.
sequel.
Yeah.
You do get a lot of these kind of, Redbeard is another big one. There's so many of these like incredible star performances, and I feel like the tent pole really is Yojimbo.
Right. And it's kind of, and it's similar. It's kind of, all right. It's hard to talk about it without already starting to compare it to the remakes, especially Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, this is a podcast where we talk about movie legacies, and Yojimbo is perhaps like one of the great inspirations, aside from like Shakespeare, when it comes to like a film structure that you can keep revisiting, and you can do it in new and exciting ways. Now, some of these were maybe not necessarily too different from each other, but yeah, Fistful of Dollars, which I think maybe touched upon a little bit when we did The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But I don't think that we really talked about it at length. I didn't even realize that was a Yojimbo remake.
I had started watching it at some point, and I knew it, like maybe around the time of that episode. So when I was watching Yojimbo, I was like, wait a second, this is that, like, oh, that's what, and it made sense that they took, like these star vehicles for Toshiro and gave them, and like kind of put Clint in that place as he's becoming a big star, and put him in that role. And I guess my comparison comes to, because what they both, and actually the 1990s revision of it, Last Man Standing, they all kind of follow that structure where you get the sense of the hero's plans. In this Sanjuro, we're here to talk about Yojimbo, so I'll say Sanjuro's plans in the scenes with the tavern owner, the bar, bar owner, the sake brewer, and of course he's like, he takes a drink and doesn't have money to pay the guy. So he's like, all right, here, hold on a second, let me do this. And goes and kills a couple of people. And he's like, all right, I think that's worth a few $100s. Yeah. And then goes, pays, drinks some more. And it's not like his whole motivation is just like, I like hanging out with this barkeeper. I like drinking, and I'm gonna, if I have to like go out and kill a few people every now and again to pay my bar tab, so be it. There's more at play. There's more going on here. And but I just want to say it's a device that I think really works nicely, because otherwise you don't know what he's doing or what he's thinking. This is the only way you know that, like, where his allegiances lie, which really is just with himself.
Right.
So, so I really enjoy the structure that way. And it also sets up great exposition. That's how you learn about the people. That's how you learn about everything.
Well, yeah. And that kind of barkeep guy, that restaurateur or whatever, you know, he's the exposition guy. He's the one that explains absolutely everything, in each iteration of this movie. And, to touch upon the beginning of each of them, which is such an awesome way to introduce this character. And for Fistful of Dollars, this is our introduction to a character that would go on to be, in two other iconic movies. Yeah. And so for it to come from Yojimbo is so cool. So in Yojimbo, he essentially is like going to take one of two roads, tosses a stick in the air, and that's how he decides which path to take. Comes to this town and immediately sees like a dog with a hand in its mouth, like a human hand in its mouth, and I feel like the motivation to kind of do what he's doing there is kind of like, something's up here and I kind of have to see what's going on. And it's like he doesn't know how he's going to get involved, but he sees these opportunities to, make some money and do a little bit of justice. Because there is this character of this woman who's being held captive away from her family. And he's just like, all right, something messed up is going on there. There's a dog with a severed hand in its mouth. Where did I just walk into? And we don't know anything about his background, but we can tell from what he displays with his katana work that he is this expert samurai. And he's got a full life behind him. There's all this stuff. Then it's like, we don't need to know any of that. And in A Fistful of Dollars, we really just see him just showing up. He doesn't make the decision to just go to this town. He immediately sees that there's a woman being held captive and people are like shooting at the woman's like son to like child, like 4-year-old to like scram. And you could tell that he's just like, well, this place is pretty messed up. What's going on here? And you kind of, and he's a little bit more wordy, I think, than Sanjuro. And by the way, Sanjuro, just like the man with no name, Clint Eastwood, or even like Bruce Willis's character in Last Man Standing, it's not his real name. And it's like, how much more mysterious can this person be?
Right. It's a name. It's a name he picked. It's his, Maxwell Hauser.
It's his Maxwell Hauser. It's his Rick Swordsworthy or whatever that guy's name was, who was just like, what's my name? And then he saw a sword and he's like, Swordsmith, whatever.
Sword. And then he sees it like advertisement for beds on the Lay.
Sort of late. That's right. He sees a bag of Lay's potato chips.
He's a real
Rick Sword Ruffles. I mean, Swordalay. There we go.
Yeah, he doesn't. You're right. It's all, I think, like in Fistful of Dollars, he's credited as Joe, but they never call him Joe.
They never call him anything. I don't.
Right.
Think.
And in was it Last Man Standing? Bruce Willis says he's John Smith.
Yeah, because he plays a lot of guys named John. At least two that I can think of at the moment.
So it was his go-to. So
yeah,
but it's really and for each of these places, it's this small like village or small town, like one road.
Yeah,
and it's just out in the middle of nowhere, and yet two warring gangs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Yojimbo, you don't get too much. The set is gorgeous. I love the set.
Yeah,
it's a really cool set. And you don't really get much from A Fistful of Dollars. I think in Last Man Standing, you see that sign on the outside of town. It's like takes place in Texas somewhere, and it's like population, and it's like a big number, but then it's crossed out, and then it says like 57. So from that, and Last Man Standing gives you, if spoon feeds the audience way more than any of the other movies. I mean, there's narration, and it's like, oh my God, don't tell me so much. Give me some work to do here.
Yeah, and I guess my experience with Last Man Standing this was my first time watching it, I think, since it was on VHS. And of course, like it was 1996. Yeah. And at that point in time, it was kind of like if you could put two Pulp Fiction cast members in a movie together. Yeah. So it was like, even if they weren't on screen together, it was like, let Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Let's like boom, boom, boom. So Christopher Walken. And
yeah, well, I mean, John Travolta and Bruce Willis and Look Who's Talking.
Yeah, yeah. Well, which was before Pulp Fiction.
That was before Pulp Fiction. That's right.
Yeah. But so and there are others. There've been others since, like Samuel Jackson, Uma Thurman,
right?
Collabs, but now you've got
Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis, Unbreakable.
Samuel L. Jackson, John Travolta, Basic.
Okay. Wow. Basic.
I know, right?
Haven't thought of that movie in a while.
Neither have I. I'm trying to remember. I think I saw like in a dollar bin like recently and was just like, oh, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson are in that together. All right. Pulp Fiction reunion.
There you go.
So you had Christopher Walken, Bruce Willis,
right? And
it was written and directed by Walter Hill. Most notably of The Warriors and 48 Hours.
48 Hours, yeah.
Among others. And so I was like pretty hyped for it. But between like the way too much narration and the gun, I'm fine with violence. Yeah. But when it's just like a lot of just loud machine gun fire, and honestly, like that was, and what's interesting is that is what I remembered about this movie that I saw on VHS like almost 30 years ago. And I think one of the reasons why I never went back to it, I couldn't remember what else, but I was just like, I just remember there being a lot of like unpleasant gunfire sounds, and like the gun action really didn't do anything for me. And then as I was watching it, I was also reminded, like, well, Christopher Walken doesn't really do Christopher Walken in this.
Right. Yeah. Mhm.
And normally you would think, like, oh, it's nice to see like Catch Me If You Can. Christopher Walken doesn't do Christopher Walken, but
Right.
he's still, but in Last Man Standing, like, he's got like a rasp because he has some, like, injury. And I think he's supposed to be like the brother in Yojimbo, the one who has the gun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way,
that freaking guy.
Isn't the gun a lot more poignant when you're not expecting to see a gun?
Right. And in this case, when you bring a gun to a katana fight, you're at the disadvantage when you're going up against Sanjuro.
Yeah.
Yeah. When that character is introduced in Yojimbo, and I'm spacing on the character's name, but it's just like, oh boy, here we go. Here's this turd showing up, and he thinks that he's so hot because he has this pistol. And the way, I'm not going to spoil it, but the way the things shake out at the end, I love the way that they kind of wrap up his story.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. And I feel like the movie as a whole, like I really appreciated so much of what it was doing and the pacing that it had, and this arc of this character who's not perfect at all. Like, he is, a scuzzy guy who, has a conscience at points. He's not only doing things selfishly, and when it comes to that woman who's being held captive, he's got this I don't know, this soft spot where he's just like, I've got to help this person and this person's family. Her husband and her son as a child. So
this isn't right.
Yeah.
This isn't right. That's not how you do that. That's not how you do it. We don't bring, you don't bring it's fine. You want to be criminals? That's fine. I have no problem with that. You bring the women and children into it, then we have a problem.
Oh, and Dan, on our last episode, we talked about the movie Z, from 1969, and I asked you a question because I wasn't positive about the answer, but I thought that it was the guy in Z who is going to be testifying to say that the character of Yago, he knows has something to do with the murder of this politician. I know that we're not talking about that right now, but his business is he varnishes coffins. And that's what Yago's delivery truck is for coffins. And so as we were talking about that movie on our last episode, and we were going to be talking about Yojimbo on this one, I was like, oh my God, wait a second. Isn't that guy, isn't like he in the coffin business? Because the business next to the tavern is the coffin maker,
right?
Which is like the most lucrative business in town.
And that's in all three of these versions we're talking about. The same type of, it's one of the first things you see is there's the coffin maker making a new coffin.
Great device.
Looking at, and you're like, he's sizing me up?
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. In A Fistful of Dollars, what happens is they kind of like opens up a window. The coffin maker just kind of looks Clint Eastwood up and down, and then he closes the window, and he's just like, he's sizing you up, he taking your measurements, and it's just like, as soon as you walk into town, it's just like, all right, here we go, this guy's gonna get some more business. But that's a great device, and I just thought that it was fun continuity between these two movies that we weren't expecting.
Oh yeah, no, that's crazy. I didn't know. I guess I either like forgot about, like, didn't retain it, or anyway, did not even retain that he was the coffin maker to when we recorded the episode.
Right.
But coffin varnisher.
Right.
But wow. What a great connection. And it's actually, so it's interesting. I mean, and if it's cool that we're just kind of like, we're, freestyling.
We're totally freestyling, man.
A little bit here. In my thinking of how you would do this story again, I was thinking of it in kind of terms of political parties. It made me think a little bit of Ides of March.
Oh, okay. How so exactly?
Well, because Gosling, I remember Gosling's kind of playing both sides. In like at a certain point, he's kind of like playing it's not entirely, but it's like that little taste of like, you know, where he's meeting with Paul Giamatti and
right.
so so in thinking about about politics, and now we think about Z, which is not inspired by Yojimbo, or maybe, I mean, I don't know. We've got, you know, master filmmakers working in the 1960s. So why wouldn't you have, you know, this film made in Japan in the early 60s that then inspires a Western made in Italy in the mid 60s? So why not a political thriller satire set in or filmed in the late 60s?
Right.
So you have these two, and it's not, this is a bit of a stretch, but you do have those, like in this one small place, these two opposing parties.
Yeah.
In this case, political / military.
Right.
Which actually interesting, going back to Z. So I was speaking with one of my students, for those new to the show. I'm a high school teacher, and one of my students he's Greek, his you know, family immigrated here, and he is very, you know, attuned to Greek history, Greek politics. But we talked about the composer for Z, and he was like, oh yeah, I grew up listening to his stuff.
Oh, cool.
But I learned a little bit more, and just about how like a lot of Greeks actually were in favor of the military junta, and that they were like, that they didn't want, they were like, you know, basically, you know, the Red Scare. So, but like his father, like this kid's father was like, he wouldn't let them play that guy's music in the house. And
wow,
if they heard his music, he'd be like, we don't listen to him. He's a communist.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So anyway, really, really interesting stuff. Just, you know, I thought about it to ask him, because I was like, well, if he hasn't seen this movie, it's probably something he'd enjoy. And I'm sure he knows about the real people involved. So yeah, we chatted about that a little bit. But anyway, so that's so that kind of brings it back to the whole, that political kind of angle, because in trying to think, all right, well, how do you retell this without, you know, I mean, how many you know, one street town things are we going to do? Like, are we going to be like, all right, now we'll set it in the Viking times, and it'll be it'll be up here, and we'll just like get everything that they from the Northmen, and you know, you use that. So I was trying to think a little different, and just thinking about it, and that was kind of one of the ideas that crossed my mind.
Okay. Was
a political, you know, of course, a present day, and the person is, maybe they are like a, you know, I don't know, technician. I was like a deep fake artist, but someone that a campaign would hire to falsify things.
Interesting.
And like also somebody who could very easily kind of operate in the shadows, and like I feel like you'd have a little more like cloak and dagger, and a little less of like this person out in the open, but that you could still have this person who just eventually is like, ooh, I've got these, this is my talent, and it's a really, like, it's a bad thing in terms of the world, right? But like, what if I can just, like, you know, tear the system down from the inside by doing this, and just completely you know, ruin it all. So that was one area where I was thinking of. And, you know, of course, ways where our protagonist does not need to be a, you know, middle-aged man.
Sure.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't want to get too far ahead. John, if there was anything else Yojimbo related that you wanted to.
No, I mean, we're talking about kind of what we would do to kind of bring back this property that's been kind of done over and over again. And I'm feeling kind of, I'm into kind of spinning up on that subject.
We're ready to keep going.
Yeah. So, my idea, and I was like, I wonder if Dan's going to go for this. And it's so funny that what?
Oh no, let's see. Cause I do have some other.
Okay. So, you have already mentioned that you are a high school teacher, and I was like, this will be a fun movie set in a high school. It's teens, and there's like a new kid in school who's, too smart for their own good. And there's, rival cliques and some funny business going on. And this, likable and kind of person, but who's got ulterior motives and is maybe just a bored teen in a lot of ways, wants to just kind of shake things up and befriends some of the, I guess, less popular kids who kind of give that exposition, such as the tavern employee, and giving
They go
that
sit at
kind
their
of
little
background.
table at lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the coffin making club.
Well,
in
I was
the
gonna
next
say,
room over.
So I was going to say, I feel like that you could actually take that if you want to go in and it's funny, at high school teacher, also, I'm starting my Shakespeare unit and talking. So today was my day of I bet you didn't know these movies were inspired by Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And 10 things I hate about you comes up there. So I mentioned I wasn't like, you guys have
Kids
seen
these
this
days
one, right?
aren't watching
I mean, some of them might. I did tell them I was like, there's a pretty good adaptation with Josh Hartnett.
Yeah.
So but it makes me think about teen horror is a big that's just always been a big subgenre, or sci-fi horror. And you think about everything going from Carrie to, Heathers even, which was another thing. Listening to that, it made me think of Christian Slater in Heathers, even though it's not that's not exactly what happens.
It's actually maybe more Christian Slater in Pump Up the Volume.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like an outsider, but everybody, hangs on his every word, not knowing that it's him. I haven't watched Pump Up the Volume in a little while, so I might have the details slightly fuzzy, but it's an influential person who's trying to tear things down.
An influencer, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
God, is Pump Up the Volume an adaptation of Yojimbo?
I would love to see it. It's almost never streaming anywhere.
I watched it a few years ago.
I haven't seen it since I was in high school. I would love to watch it again.
It's a lot of fun.
Great movie. But so it makes me think of kind of a teen horror thing. I know Jennifer's that kind of Jennifer's Body vibe.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think about it in a death way, but more of a disassembling the cliques way. Having people turn against each other and kind of manipulating them, much like
Hold on a second. Mean Girls.
It's a lot. I was thinking about Mean Girls actually, but without her getting too sucked in.
Right. And also she's not necessarily intentionally playing, she's not really intentionally playing any sides, but you want to have somebody who's more of a, that type of, I think of a Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Brick energy.
Yeah.
Of that, the new kid, the loner, who makes some friends. I mean, that sounds like it could be a lot of fun. Yeah. I'd be down for that. And their name could be, maybe their name is Jimbo. So when they see him, they say, "Yo, Jimbo,
yo." Could be.
So that's fun. So
What else did you have?
My other idea was and this is of course because I'm going to my Romeo and Juliet unit, but I was thinking about that, like, oh, all right, two parties. What if you did a Romeo and like in the Romeo and Juliet universe, but it's a prequel. It's set like a generation or two before Romeo and Juliet, but it's like the Capulet and that, like, this is the thing that happens that actually puts the Capulet and Montague feud into that next gear. So it kind of like it starts where it's like maybe even Capulet and Montague are like friendly or they're it's a friendly competition, but now you have this person who comes to town and they're just like, oh, these guys are assholes. Someone needs to bring them down.
Can you remind me what what their business, like what it was that the families did?
Coffin making, in fact. No. Oh, the irony. So unknown what they did. It is just two families alike in stature. So but they're not nobility. It's like they're successful merchants. I think they're just like, merchants. I think we're talking about like 17th, early 17th, late 16th century, Verona, Italy. Like they're merchants, maybe importers.
Sure.
Could be. Yeah. But whatever it is, they are in competition. Those are the two main factions in this city.
Mm-hmm.
And Romeo and Juliet, we don't necessarily see that happen, but it would be interesting to do it, to set it, like I said, 100 years earlier, and have it be this person who's just that's what they do.
Rebel rouser.
Yeah, they're like, well, like a gun for hire or a sword for hire.
Yeah.
And again, brings back the swords here.
Yeah. Okay. Talking a little bit more about Yojimbo, something that I wanted to make note of that I really loved about this movie is the way that Sanjuro would eat rice. When he'd take that bowl right up to his face with the chopsticks and just go, I'm like, the way that he ate was so cool and I loved it. And I was like, oh, I could watch this dude, because I don't know, there was just something so, I don't know, primal about it. And it's like, this guy is not a, superhuman character that's coming into town. Like, he's a dirtbag, and he's just one step ahead of everybody. And he's really good at the blade.
And he's just eating to, like, for fuel.
Yeah.
He's not going to critique the rice. He's not going to he's not going to suggest more seasoning in the future. No, he is just like, he's
sustenance.
Just like, yeah, I'm hungry.
Yeah. And I really did like the relationship that he did have with the, like, innkeeper or whatever. Yeah. This guy, it starts off with him just being like, okay, I'm going to give you this, but then you got to get out of here. This place sucks, man. Yeah. Like, you got to move or you're going to die, dude. And as things kind of move on, and he kind of sees him as a friend and he wants to help him. And even the coffin maker, wants to help out. And it's just like, all right, we're all in this, I guess. And I really liked that little unit that they had of, like, him with, like, the real people.
Right. Well, and it does somewhat feel like this is a town where they've been waiting for someone like him to come along.
Totally.
Which is very much the vibe in a lot of like Westerns. Yeah. Especially. It really.
Well, and it kind of it comes from this.
But yeah, you can really see it, and you can really get like, you really get that Western vibe from this, but knowing, right. I mean, not that there weren't Westerns being made, but
it changed the way that Westerns were made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because they weren't being made by Italians yet. And
I know. Well, this is what kind of set it apart. It was only 3 years later that Fistful of Dollars came out, and without crediting Kurosawa, and for which he was
Controversy.
sued.
Yeah.
Leone was sued. So, and I did notice that in Last Man Standing, Akira Kurosawa is credited at the beginning. So
Yes.
it's like, even though I read, I think it was just on like IMDb trivia, was in the Last Man Standing was like, this is not considered a remake, but it's like, it's right. And it's just like, no. This is like straight up remake. Like
Yeah.
everything about this is pretty much the same. You can't just put a gun in the guy's hands and call it different.
Right.
Or give it narration, It is.
No, it's pretty much. I think
every character there's a 1-for-1 basically.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the one kind of core element that's lost from Yojimbo to Fistful and Last Man Standing is the like backstory of how the feud started, and that it was like the older gangster or like the older gangster decides that like his idiot son is going to take over rather than like his capable right-hand man.
Yeah.
I feel like that did not carry over to the like the Baxters versus the Rojos in in Fistful.
Right, but in Last Man Standing, it is, takes place like Prohibition era, and it's Italians versus the Irish, which we've seen a lot of other times. Isn't Gangs of New York Italian versus Irish or something?
Gangs of New York is like, is it just all Irish?
It's all Irish,
or maybe like Irish and like is Daniel Day-Lewis? I feel like they're all Irish in that.
They might all be Irish in that one, but like that's Italian and Irish is something that I feel like we've seen before, and but like
did Fargo have a season where it was no.
You mean the one that was like set in the 50s with Chris Rock?
Right. No, there was no. That was just and Jason Schwartzman.
Right. Well, that was the Italian family.
Yeah. But no. Fargo, because that was the other. That was kind of the other thing. Was like it definitely it feels like it could be, a season of Fargo.
Totally, absolutely, could be a season of Fargo
with the two, battling families. So I know I still haven't watched the last season of Fargo, mostly because
it's good.
Is it good? I was like, I didn't want to watch. I know it involves some of the like MAGA and it's like more contemporary, and I
wouldn't say MAGA, more libertarian.
Okay.
It's not MAGA. It's mostly like just anti-government.
Yeah.
So, but it's so good. John Hamm is amazing in it. It's a great season. You got to watch it.
Yeah. I'll get there. It's nice to have a few things banked. So,
yeah.
But yeah,
I was just going to say to our dear listeners or viewers on Spotify or YouTube, if you have anything that you want to mention that we're not talking about for Yojimbo, Fistful of Dollars, or Last Man Standing, if there's one that we aren't talking about at all that like is obviously fitting into this category, then please let us know. ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com. Share your ideas for how you'd want to bring this back somehow. It's always fun to kind of hear what everybody's thinking.
What about something in space?
Something in space. You're talking about kind of like a one road town kind of a thing. What if like there's like a stowaway on a cruise ship? And like, there's like some, weirdness going on the cruise ship, and this person's.
Wait. Okay, so the cruise ship has got, all right, so you have two different families that have booked like huge things on the cruise ship.
Well, this is now we're getting into the territory of like, what is it? You're cordially invited. The like Reese Witherspoon, Will Ferrell. Wedding
as I was
rom-com.
saying it, but on a cruise ship though, that could be interesting. But I would also like, space, like on a, small.
But but it's the question is like, how do you get the person coming in that's not, that's kind of like the stranger essentially?
How do you get them there? Maybe.
Yeah, how does that person encounter this world? Or does it just take place on a different planet and it's like a Star Wars-y thing where like there's an entire thing here going on that like we don't even know the half of it?
I feel like it's that. I feel like it's on some, like, not even a planet, but a moon. It's on like a moon and there's mining that's happening, and like it's like a mining town, and of course, like, yeah, there's the two, they're trying to, control it because of course there's no government. There's no, we're fairly early on in the space colonization here.
But here's the thing. The planet, Melmac. The stranger, Alf.
I'm going to get every cat out of this town and into my stomach.
We need an Alf movie, man.
We so need an... Hey, Willie.
Before all of the Alf fans die off, we need an Alf movie.
6 seasons in a movie? I don't know. How many seasons did they go with Alf?
Oh, I don't even know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's so funny. Sometimes I watch my son, who's 3, running around the house, and I do think to myself, he's perfect. I think of Alf in the opening credits. I'd be like, he's the perfect size. He could totally play Alf.
Yeah, let's get him an Alf costume for sure. So anyway, please listen to the show. Other episodes, obviously you've listened to this one. Subscribe, comment on YouTube, follow us on YouTube, comment on Spotify, leave us a review on Apple, rate us, all that kind of stuff. We got some really great comments on our Zardoz episode on YouTube. So for all of you who are watching there, it's a pleasure to have you, and we love hearing what your thoughts are. So keep that up. And Dan, I was talking earlier about how we're doing this series A to Z, then Z to A. So we're going Z to A now. So Z was Z, Y was Yojimbo. What is X?
X marks the spot, baby, and that spot is Xanadu from 1980, directed by Robert Greenwald, starring, speaking of Walter Hill and the Warriors, Michael Beck of the Warriors fame, Olivia Newton-John, and the legend Gene Kelly in his last big screen role. Yeah,
and also in Last Man Standing, what's his name? Bottle Fingers.
Yeah, David Patrick Kelly.
I knew it was a 3 first name kind of a thing, but he's in that, and he was one of the standout characters in Last Man Standing.
He was and it was funny for David Patrick Kelly. I felt subdued.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, when you're acting alongside like Christopher Walken, it's kind of like you need
also subdued. Yeah, so Xanadu, is this your first Xanadu experience?
This is my first Xanadu experience, and
mine too.
I am psyched. Yeah.
So ready. So many roller skating puns.
Well, I really like Michael Beck in Warriors. What could go wrong?
And we'll answer that question on the next episode.
Well, Dan, as you are traveling from weird-ass town to weird-ass town, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.